Today we're looking at those mustache players for Dynasty Fantasy Football. Those guys hanging out on the back end of rosters. Those guys you can pick up for cheap or trade for them cheap. So we're going to be looking at those deep plays and also some not so deep plays for those shallow leagues as well. Before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're talking about these players every day, the player values for Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're helping you work those Dynasty trades. And of course, we're looking at that rookie draft class. That deep, stacked running back class right now. Click that button. Stop missing out. But Zacchaeus is going to the Bears. Could be the wide receiver 3 once everything's said and done. Had a good run at the end of the season last year. And this is a beefed up Bears team where a lot of people are angling their pieces. He's valued at 133. That's how deep we're going. 133 among wide receivers right now. And after everything's said and done with your rookie drafts, and you did not get any rookie wide receivers, or you're kind of light, you're looking for a guy off waivers, or you're looking for a throw-in and trade, this might be a guy to look at. If you're looking for another throw-in and trades or a pickup, you're in a deeper league, Tim Patrick, maybe not. But no sunk cost because we're looking for free here. He does have one wide receiver, one game last year. Remember, 2023, non-contact injury causes miss the season. This was a ramp-up year trying to acclimate to Detroit Lions. We're watching him through training camp. We're watching what this team does through the draft. But you get the idea. Wide receiver 144, very cheap. Hendon Hooker. We just saw Joe Milton get traded. We saw him go. Hendon Hooker's another prospect that could be on the map right now. QB 52. Super flex dandy right here that could hold more value than expected, and you never know till it happens. Good career out of Tennessee. A player that was drafted in the 3rd round. Okay, draft capital. And right now the stock is cheap. And it could jump up a fair bit if something happens. Could not. But you got to call out backup quarterbacks when they're kind of trendy on the radar. We saw Joe Milton go. We might see him go. And we might see something happen where you may want him for Dynasty Fantasy Football. On top of that, in season, something happens. And he's starting to start. It's middle of the year. This is a team that could buoy a little bit of production. Another thing to think about. Mecole Hardman to the Packers. Christian Watson has a vast injury history. He can fill in that spot. Speed downfield. Not a reliable wide receiver, not a good wide receiver, but a guy in an offense that pushes it downfield, that can command air yards with a quarterback that will push it down there, that's looking to make some changes. And we see injuries happen to this wide receiver depth chart, mainly Christian Watson every year. Wide receiver 146. Potent offense here that you could stash backups on. Marvin Mims. A little bit more shallow play, but maybe a deep play to you. A deep ball dandy, a volatile wide receiver. We might step it up in year 3. A solid profile coming out of Oklahoma. Good hands. Has splashed a few times in the league now. Might command more targets starting next year. His target started to ramp up from week 12 going on. Maybe 2025 is a little different. Now we're looking back at Keaton Mitchell. He is the Will Fuller of running backs. Something happens to Derrick Henry, or if we get some injuries, maybe it's just a few week run. He could pop off a run here and there and get you by a few games. He just needs one carry with space. We're talking about a 4-3 guy with a lot of zip here. We're not talking about a guy that we're expecting consistent production from if ever given the opportunity. They love this kid. They gave him a decent contract as a UDFA rookie back in the day, a couple years ago. 23 years old, coming back from a devastating knee injury. Should be further removed from that. Should be good to go in 2025. Tyler Algier, looking at him, RB 53. Something happens to Bijan Robinson. This is another running back to look at. We know he can churn out yards. He's a former 1,000-yard rusher. We also have an RB1 week to his name last year, and an RB2 week. Another guy to stash, RB 53. We're in stash territory because we got a deep running back class. Jermaine Burton, wide receiver 100, should be rostered in leagues, but also an afterthought. Just bad news all around. But if you liked him, now's the time to get in if you did. If you don't, then you know what to do. But he likes to hang out in casinos. Had some other bad things happen with his apartments. That being said, maybe he cleans it up. Maybe he has a good off season. Maybe increases his stock in training camp, and you go from wide receiver 100 to 80, and you're able to move him around. He's more liquid for you. Whatever it is, there's an option. Darius Slayton, wide receiver 114. Russ is there. He's going to say, let's ride. He likes to push the ball downfield. Darius Slayton pushes it downfield. Malik Neighbors is going to get about 40% of the targets. Wan'Dale Robinson's going to get 20% or so, and that's all the short targets. But we saw it last year. Malik Neighbors got so many targets, he got banged up a few times. Darius Slayton, too, is a guy that can be a splash play machine. Any given Sunday, running routes downfield, they brought him back. That is something to think about. Very cheap for the cost. Javon Baker, around wide receiver 100. A prospect that has some talent, some gusto, that didn't fire. But now you're catching him even cheaper. You can catch him as a throw-in and a trade. But this team has proven to be very patient. They're patient with Kayshon Boutte. Why can't they be patient with Baker and Polk? And if that happens, maybe down the line, maybe even 2026 or so, maybe we catch a run in games or something. But now you got a backup wide receiver here. And if you don't like this wide receiver class, or if it didn't go well for you at the wide receiver spot because you were looking at running backs, maybe Javon Baker's a cheap buy for you because he ain't getting expensive. Noah Brown's cheap. He's back with the Commanders. He had a good run commanding targets, 8, 7, 6, 7 in a 10 spots on targets. That's something to chase. We were chasing that in redraft. It got you 2 wide receiver 2 weeks. Not sexy, but for the last wide receiver on your depth chart, that's fine. It looks like we're going to be inserted back to some sort of role comparable on those targets. It's going to be different now. We got Debo there and some other pieces, but still Noah Brown has a spot on this team, has a role, and it seems like no matter where he's at, he has some sort of role where he's just vibrating enough where you got to pay attention to him. Troy Franklin, whenever he's running routes, he gets targets. About 22% of his routes run, he gets targeted because he has that relationship with Bo Nix from back in college. If we step it up in training camp, if we develop going forward, if we get better, earn more of a role, that could lead to something. He's cheap. Wide receiver 73. That's a stash in shallow leagues. He should be rostered in basic to deeper leagues, but also cheap in trade. Another guy to look at. I expect this team to bring in a wide receiver. However, once you get out of that first round, a wide receiver of consequence is less likely to happen for a guy like Troy Franklin. Kayshon Boutte. Again, this is a wide receiver that you need to pay attention to, that you can get on the cheap here. And there are not many wide receivers valued in the wide receiver 80 range that commanded 90% route participation rate, that was running on almost every single route most of the season. Only one wide receiver, one game. He didn't fire, but he was running a lot of routes. At that price tag, you're not going to get many routes ran. You're not going to get that many opportunities. You're just hoping that the starters get hurt and they get the opportunities. And that might be something we're hoping with Kayshon Boutte. If they pay up for a wide receiver in the draft. We also got Diggs there, but Boutte was getting work. And at that price tag, you can dance with that. Amari Demercado. One thing about Amari Demercado, and it's a very small sample, and it could get messed up if Trey Benson develops and becomes a stud. But what we saw last year is when Connor came out for a short stint to get that ankle taped up, it was split between carries. They split it a little bit. He got some opportunity. Does that mean that's going to happen if that happens in 2025? No, it could not, because Benson's going to have another year developing the offense. But if I have one and not the other, then Demercado might be a guy to look at. He's cheap. And looking at this backfield, they just spent a third round on a running back that they like. So odds are, since they already got Connor, they're probably not dipping their toes into this running back well. And if they do, it's going to be a cheaper one. Demercado is involved in this offense. He's established. And down the line in season, we know injuries happen. If Connor goes down, he will have some sort of role. His value, production-wise, will at least be interesting to where you're going to be looking at him. Malik Washington is another wide receiver we're looking at. Talented wide receiver. If he was in this year's class, he'd be talked up a shit ton. You know that, right? If he was in this year's class, he'd be talked up a shit ton. You got him cheap right here. Maybe you do not like the wide receivers on the board when you're up. This is a pivot play for you. A good pivot play. I mean, the upside's not grand. They don't have sunk cost invested in him. They use him a lot in the slot. But if you're just looking on pure talent versus your pick versus what you got, here you go. Malachi Corley, we got Justin Fields there. It's very ambiguous. They could get a pass catcher in the draft. They're in a spot in the draft where they can go a bunch of different routes. Also, those short passes. Those short passes as an outlet. Maybe they use them a little bit more. Maybe he develops. Wide receiver 100. Cheap price tag. I mean, you can get him as a throw-in in some deals. Maybe not. But something to dance with. Elijah Mitchell with the Chiefs. He may not make it out of training camp as a running back on the depth chart or as even an RB2. This team might draft the running back considering the injuries, considering what they went through, and they just picked up Elijah Mitchell, who has a vast injury history. They might pick up another running back in the draft, and he may not go through training camp unscathed. His price is up there now. He's not really a stash play, but in shallow leagues, maybe. But he's also a chief, and chief players, they get extra value, especially when they start seeing touches. So another player to think about. Is he Abanikanda still in the Niners? I just checked our lads. He's still there. Back end of the depth chart. He's still there. If they do not go running back, and they may not, they got Grondo. They may see what's up with Christian McCaffrey. You got Izzy there on the back end of the depth chart. Very talented running back prospect out of Pitt. Talented with the Jets. They just couldn't stop drafting running backs. He had some flashes in training camp. It's not like he was a straight-up jabron. He's not straight-up jabroni. He's not. And they brought him back. They brought him back. There's something there. RB78, he's not in the hundreds either. They brought him back. Pay attention to him. Tutu Atwell got some money. Tutu Atwell's going to be on the field. He's going to be getting deep shots. Could be a good splash play for you. Around wide receiver 100, so don't hate on that. Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks. New quarterback coming in. The wide receiver depth chart here ain't really getting better. It ain't getting better through the draft. We could watch him through training camp. See how he is in training camp. He always gains some steam during training camp. Watch him through there. But at that price, if you're just looking for something, he might amount to something. Probably not. But I can say that with anybody in that ranking range. Ray McLeod, 120. If you are looking for somebody that can hit double-digit production on any given week, wide receiver 3 range, around 11 points or so, but can also get you 2 to 3. This is a guy to look at because he's on the field running a lot of routes, getting opportunity. 5.1 targets a game last year. Low ends 1 to 3. High ends 7 to 11. That's solid. That's something to look at. He's free. He's cheap. They might bring in another wide receiver. That could happen. That could impact him. But there's also other areas they can roll in the draft. Joe Milton just went to the Dallas Cowboys. I put this up thinking he'd still be on the Patriots. But the Dallas Cowboys, we got CeeDee Lamb. We're probably going to add some other pieces in the draft. Dak Prescott, is he going to play a full season? Maybe. Maybe. But if you're looking for a backup quarterback with some talent, the Cowboys said, hey, we're interested in him. And Trey Lance was holding value as a backup with Dallas a little bit in Superflex when he first signed. Joe Milton's got arm strength. A lot of people like him. I like him. I want to watch him develop. I want to see what he does on the field. But that could be a sign there's something more to come if he continues to progress. Let me know what you think about these stashes in the comments below. Of course, I have more stashes coming at you, so you always got to keep watching. So hit that subscribe button right now. One thing for watching, though. Catch you on the next video.